It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. The kind of day that felt completely ordinary sunlight pouring through the windows, the faint hum of the dishwasher in the background, my bare feet pressing into the cool tile floor. I was chopping onions for dinner, humming along to a song I didn't even like, and then he walked in. Daniel. My brother-in-law. My husband's younger brother, the fun one, the charming one, the one everyone loved at family gatherings. Because he always knew what to say and never stayed long enough to be truly known. He stepped into the kitchen like he'd always belonged there. Except this time, he closed the door behind him and locked it. I turned slowly, still holding the knife. Everything okay? His eyes scanned the room, then landed on me. He smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile you give your sister-in-law. It was something else, something dangerous. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me a little too closely. "Your husband's still at work?" he asked. I hesitated. "Yeah, he's got a meeting downtown." Daniel nodded, tapping his fingers against the granite. "Good, we've got time then." I put down the knife. Time for what I asked. He took a step closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, earthy, expensive, too intimate for this setting. "Time to talk," he said. But his eyes said something else entirely. Something my body understood before my mind could catch up. The air in the room shifted, thickened, like a storm was forming somewhere just outside the window, unseen, but undeniable. "Daniel," I said, trying to sound steady, "what are you doing?" He smiled again. That same smile. And that's when I realized he hadn't come to borrow sugar. He hadn't come to ask about my husband. He hadn't even come to talk. He came because he knew something I hadn't admitted to myself until that very moment. I had been waiting for him. Daniel had always been magnetic. The kind of man who didn't just walk into a room, he shifted its gravity. At family dinners, he was the one who made everyone laugh, just a little too hard, poured just a little too much wine, and always left just before dessert. Like he knew if he stayed any longer, someone might actually see through the charm. I used to admire him from a safe distance, until the distance started shrinking. At first, it was innocent. A brush of his hand when we reached for the same wine glass. A wink across the table when someone told a joke I clearly didn't find funny. A lingering hug when he arrived or left. And then came the text messages. "Hope your day isn't as boring as mine. Don't let my brother work you too hard. You looked different tonight." In a good way. I told myself he was just being friendly. That this was how Daniel talked to everyone. That I was reading too much into it. But deep down, I knew better. I should have blocked the number. I should have deleted the messages. Instead, I saved them. Now, here we were. In my kitchen, door locked, his eyes searching mine. He stepped closer, reaching past me to turn off the stove burner behind me. His arm grazed my shoulder. I flinched, not because I was afraid, because I didn't move away fast enough. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "I've been busy," I replied, trying to sound casual. "With my brother," he asked, the corner of his mouth curling. "Does he still forget your birthday? Still leave dishes in the sink? Still fall asleep before 9? I didn't answer. Because he was right. Daniel leaned in, close enough that I could feel his breath on my neck. "You deserve more than silence and cold sheets, you know." "Daniel," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "you're crossing a line." He didn't step back. He didn't apologize. He just looked at me like he already had. "I didn't come here to cross it," he said. "I came here because I think you already did." I should have told him to leave. Instead, I turned away. Not to escape, but to hide the truth already written on my face. He didn't need me to say it out loud. Some confessions live in the silence. And that silence was getting louder by the second. I should have opened the door. I should have told him to leave, to never come back, not without my husband home, not with that look in his eyes. But instead, I stood there, still silent, pretending that if I didn't move, none of this was real. But it was. Daniel took another step. He was standing directly behind me now. I could feel the warmth of his body. I could hear his breathing. Slow, measured, intentional. "You know," he murmured, "it wouldn't take much. Just one moment. One choice." I squeezed my eyes shut. This wasn't happening, except it was. I thought about my husband, about his absence, his detachment, the way he had begun treating our marriage like a shared mortgage rather than a bond. I thought about the way he looked past me at dinner, touched me like obligation, not desire. And then I thought about Daniel, how he looked at me, how he listened, how he made me feel like I still existed. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. I turned around slowly to face him. His hand was already raised, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingertips lingered near my cheek. His eyes locked onto mine like they were looking for permission I hadn't yet given, but might. "Tell me," he said again, "and I'll walk out that door like this never happened." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Not stop, not go, just air. He took it as a sign, and then he kissed me. It wasn't rough. It wasn't rushed. It was soft, slow, deliberate, like he'd imagined it more than once, like he'd waited for this. And God help me, I didn't pull away. I kissed him back. Just for a second. Just long enough for the guilt to root itself in my skin. Then I broke it. I stepped back, breathless, heart pounding. "We can't," I said. "I know," he replied. But neither of us moved. The room was suddenly too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after something irreversible. He backed away, first eyes searching mine. "I should go," he said. I nodded, unable to speak. He unlocked the door, stepped out, and disappeared down the hall like a ghost. I stayed in the kitchen, frozen in place, a single question echoing in my head. If 1 second can change everything, what happens next? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside my husband, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. So steady, so unaware. His hand brushed mine at one point, maybe in sleep, and I flinched. Not because I didn't love him, but because I had just let someone else touch me in a way that should have belonged only to him. I kept replaying that moment in the kitchen over and over. Daniel's eyes, the heat of his body behind mine. The kiss. It hadn't been deep, it hadn't been dramatic. But it had been real. And it had awakened something in me that I had tried for years to bury under schedules, dinners, laundry, and polite smiles at the in-laws table. That something terrified me. The next morning, I moved through the house like a shadow cleaning folding, organizing anything to keep my hands busy and my thoughts away. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt into my throat. It wasn't Daniel, until it was. "We need to talk." I didn't respond right away. I stared at the message like it was a lit match. What was there to talk about? We had already crossed the line. Words wouldn't pull us back. Hours passed. I thought about deleting the message, pretending it never arrived. Instead, I typed, "Not here." He replied instantly. "Tomorrow, the lake house, noon." The lake house. Mark's family retreat, rarely used now. Isolated. Quiet. Too quiet. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. That evening, Mark came home early, smiling like he hadn't noticed the storm swirling inside our marriage. He kissed my cheek and asked if I wanted to go out that weekend, maybe catch a movie like we used to. I nodded, even smiled back. But inside, I was somewhere else, somewhere darker. Because a single moment might change everything. But a second one, that's what breaks you. The drive to the lake house felt longer than usual. I told Mark I was running errands. I told myself I was just going to say goodbye to end whatever had started, before it grew into something we couldn't control. But the moment I saw Daniel's car parked beside the old porch steps, I knew I was lying. Not just to Mark, not just to Daniel, to myself. The lake house hadn't changed in years. Same peeling shutters, same cracked wood beneath the welcome mat. But stepping inside, it felt different. Heavy. Like the air knew what we were about to do. Daniel was already there, standing near the window, staring out at the gray water like he couldn't bear to look at me yet. He turned when I shut the door. Neither of us said anything. He crossed the room slowly, and for a moment I thought he might reach for me again. But he didn't. Instead, he sat on the edge of the old couch, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he said. "I know. I didn't come to your house that day, thinking I know I cut him off, but it did. Silence. Outside, the wind brushed through the trees like a warning. I haven't stopped thinking about it," he said finally. "Not just the kiss. Everything. The way you looked at me before it happened. Like you were already breaking." I swallowed hard. "You don't know what my marriage is like, Daniel." He looked up. "Then tell me." I should have said no. Instead, I sat down across from him, and I told him. I told him about the distance, the cold nights, the smiles that never reached our eyes, the conversations that turned to arguments, then to silence. I told him how invisible I'd felt for so long. I forgot what it was like to be seen. He listened, not politely, completely. "I never meant to fall for you," he said softly. The words hit harder than I expected. "I'm married to your brother," I reminded him. "And I'm not proud of it," he said. "But I'm not sorry I felt it." "You made me feel alive again, like I wasn't just existing in someone else's life." Tears welled in my eyes, not from guilt, not from shame, from truth. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Because once the truth is spoken out loud, it can't be taken back. I stood. I should go. Daniel followed me to the door. But just before I stepped out, he whispered, "If you ever need a way out, I'd give you one." I turned back, met his eyes. And in that moment, I didn't say no. I just closed the door behind me. But something stayed open. I didn't go home right away. After leaving the lake house, I parked at a gas station 15 minutes from town and sat in the car engine off hands, trembling on the steering wheel. I kept replaying Daniel's words. "If you ever need a way out, I'd give you one." What terrified me most wasn't the offer. It was that I didn't reject it. When I finally walked into our house, the smell of Mark's cologne greeted me before he did. He was upstairs talking on the phone, laughing probably about something mindless, harmless, normal. I walked past him with a quick wave and a kiss on his cheek. He didn't even pause the call. The entire evening passed in routine dinner, reheated laundry, folded dishwasher emptied. But inside, I was unraveling. At 200 a.m., I woke up with a start. I had dreamed I was at the lake house again, only this time I hadn't left. This time, I had kissed Daniel back and not stopped. I crept out of bed and went downstairs for water. That's when I saw it. A message from Daniel. "You okay?" I stared at it, just 3 words. But I read them like a lifeline. "No," I typed back. "But I will be." No reply. But he'd seen it. That was enough. The next few days we didn't talk, not in person, not by text. We pretended nothing had happened. We played our roles. I baked a casserole for my mother-in-law's birthday. Daniel brought a bottle of wine. We sat at the same table, shared the same jokes, even passed each other. The breadbasket 2 people with a fire burning beneath their skin, surrounded by a family that had no idea. At one point, Mark placed his hand on my lower back and leaned in. "You've been smiling more lately," he whispered. "Whatever changed? Keep it." I looked across the table at Daniel. He was already looking at me. That night, I cried in the shower because I didn't know who I was anymore. Because I didn't know if I wanted to go back to the woman I used to be. Because a part of me didn't miss her. And in the space between guilt and wanting something dangerous was growing. A reason to choose Daniel, and an excuse not to stop. It was Mark's idea. "Let's have Daniel over for dinner," he said one morning, chewing toast like it was just another Wednesday. It's been a while since we had a proper catch-up. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. I managed to nod. Sure, that sounds nice. Nice. That word had become a shield. I used it to cover every sharp edge, every flicker of guilt or desire. It was easier to be nice than honest. Daniel arrived at 7. He brought flowers for me. I laughed and said something light like, "You always bring the best gifts." Mark didn't notice. The 3 of us sat down for dinner, candlelight flickering between wine glasses. I made chicken marsala. I had learned the recipe years ago when Mark and I were still in that trying to impress each other phase. Now I cooked it out of habit. But that night it felt symbolic an offering, a peace treaty, or maybe a farewell. Daniel was quieter than usual, less jokes, more glances. Halfway through the meal, Mark excused himself to take a work call upstairs. The silence between me and Daniel was immediate electric. He took a slow sip of wine. "This is cruel," he whispered. "What is pretending?" I shook my head. "This is dinner, that's all." His eyes narrowed. "Then why do your hands shake when you pass me the bread?" I looked down. They were shaking. "You need to stop," I said. "I'm trying." He stood, picked up his glass, and walked to the window. "I wasn't lying," he said, voice lower now. "If you wanted a way out, I'd give it to you. But I also know I'm the worst way to leave someone." That hit something deep. I stood and walked over to him. "I'm not asking you for a way out," I said. "I'm asking you to help me stay in this life, this marriage, this role I chose." Daniel turned to face me. His eyes didn't burn with desire this time. They shimmered with something harder to fight compassion. "I don't think you chose this life," he said. "I think you surrendered to it." Upstairs, Mark's footsteps approached. Conversation resumed. The wine flowed. Daniel left after dessert, thanked me for the meal, hugged Mark like nothing had happened, and walked out the door. But before he did, he caught my eye and said, just loud enough, "I'll stop, but not because I want to." That night, I stood at the kitchen sink for 30 minutes after Mark had gone to bed, hands submerged in soapy water, staring out the window at nothing. Because Daniel had said he'd stop, but he hadn't said he'd disappear. 2 weeks passed. No texts, no glances, no accidental run-ins at family dinners. Daniel disappeared like smoke after a match is snuffed out fast, clean, and final. I should have felt relieved, but instead I felt hollow. I told myself I was stronger for staying faithful. I told myself I was protecting my marriage, my family, my sanity. But I was also lying to myself in a way that only silence makes clear. Then came the rain. A summer thunderstorm rolled in one Saturday night unannounced. It was the kind of storm that came down sideways windows, rattling wind screaming through the cracks. The sky a black sheet of guilt. Mark had gone out of town that morning for a company retreat. I was alone. And then at 9:43 p.m., there was a knock on my door. I didn't need to check. I already knew. Daniel stood on the porch, soaked to the bone hair, matted to his forehead shirt, clinging to his chest. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't stopped thinking. "I shouldn't be here," he said. "But you are." "I tried," he whispered. God knows I tried. Lightning cracked behind him. And that's when I moved. I stepped aside. I let him in. We didn't speak for a long time. He peeled off his jacket, left a trail of water on the floor. I handed him a towel. Our hands brushed. He didn't let go. "I thought walking away would make it easier," he said. But it just made the silence louder. "I told myself I could forget," I replied. But forgetting is a lie people tell to survive. He stepped closer. This time I didn't step back. "This isn't just about temptation, is it?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, it's about loneliness. About feeling invisible in your own house, and about wanting something you shouldn't, a beat, and needing it anyway." He touched my cheek. His hand was cold, but the warmth between us ignited like a spark in a dry forest. "I'm not here to ruin your life," he said. "I'm here because I think you already gave it away piece by piece and no one noticed." Tears welled in my eyes, not because he was wrong, because he was right. And then as the thunder growled in the distance, he kissed me again. This time it wasn't gentle. It wasn't a question. It was an answer to a truth we had both tried too hard to bury, to a love neither of us should have wanted, but both of us needed. We didn't speak afterward. We didn't need to. Daniel fell asleep beside me on the living room couch, still damp from the rain. His chest rose and fell with the kind of peace I hadn't seen on a man's face in years, not even Mark's. And for a moment in that quiet bubble of forbidden warmth, I let myself believe in the illusion, that this was okay, that this was mine. I watched the rain streak down the windows as the world outside stayed blind to the war unraveling inside me. When I woke the next morning, the sun was out. The storm was gone. Daniel was gone too. He'd left without a note, without a sound. Only a folded towel on the armrest and a small puddle by the door hinted he had even been there. And still, everything in the room felt rearranged. I sat alone in silence. The guilt didn't hit me right away. It slid in slowly, like the warmth fading from a cooling cup of coffee. The realization that something irreversible had happened wasn't a scream. It was a whisper. Later that afternoon, Mark called. His voice was cheerful. He told me about the fishing trip, about the jokes at the campfire, about how he'd bring back something for me. I told him I missed him. It wasn't a lie. I did miss him, but not the way a wife misses a husband. I missed the version of us that hadn't been cracked yet. Before the silence. Before the distance. Before I opened the door to someone else. That night, I stood in the hallway staring at the wedding photo hanging near the stairs. Mark looked proud. I looked hopeful. I tried to remember how that version of me felt, what she wanted, what she feared. But she was gone now, buried beneath the storm. Just like the line I had promised never to cross. And what scared me most, I wasn't sure I wanted her back. The days that followed felt stretched, like time had lost its structure, and I was floating through a life I no longer recognized. Mark returned from his trip smiling and sun-kissed, completely unaware of what I'd done. He kissed me on the forehead. He handed me a trinket from the lodge gift shop, He told me he'd missed me, and I smiled. I hugged him. I thanked him. But the truth buzzed beneath my skin like static. I had betrayed him, not just with my body, with my silence, with the way I now looked at his brother and couldn't hide what had happened between us. Daniel didn't reach out, neither did I. But every time the phone rang, every time I walked past the lake house in my mind, I wondered if he was thinking of me. The next family gathering was the test. Mark's mother was hosting a barbecue. It was casual, loud, full of kids and laughter and grilled corn. I told myself it would be fine. Just another Sunday. Then Daniel arrived, and time stopped. He looked the same, but not. There was a shift in his eyes. He smiled, shook hands, helped set up the chairs. He was perfect. Too perfect. He didn't look at me once. Not during the toast, not during the dessert. Not even when Mark pulled me close for a photo and Daniel stood just 3 feet away. But I felt him. The air between us buzzed like a wire ready to snap. Later, as the sun began to set and the kids ran barefoot through the yard, I escaped inside for real air. I stood at the kitchen sink staring out the window, trying to remember how to breathe like nothing was broken. He came in. I didn't turn around. He didn't speak. He just stood there in the space behind me where he wasn't supposed to be. "You look happy," he said. Finally, his voice like gravel softened by wind. "I'm not," I whispered. A long pause. "I won't come to your house again," he said. "And I won't text. You don't have to worry." "That's not why I'm not happy," I said, turning toward him. "I'm not happy because I keep asking myself what kind of woman lets something happen, then pretends it didn't." He stepped closer. "You're the kind of woman who's been invisible for too long," he said. "And now you've been seen." Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. He reached for the doorknob and paused. "When you're ready to stop pretending," he said, "you know where to find me." Then he was gone, and I stood there alone again. But this time the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like a question, waiting for my answer. The days that followed were a blur of movement and numbness. I cooked. I cleaned. I laughed at Mark's jokes. I smiled at the mailman. I did all the things a good wife was supposed to do. But every time I passed a mirror, I flinched, because I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me anymore. She looked like me, same eyes, same hands, same routine. But something behind her eyes had changed. She wasn't pretending she was whole. She wasn't pretending she wasn't tempted. And worst of all, she wasn't pretending to regret it. One night after Mark had fallen asleep, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and said it out loud for the first time. I let him kiss me. I kissed him back. And I don't know what I want now. Hearing the words, my own voice echoing through the tiles, it shattered something inside me. But it also freed me. The next morning I drove. Nowhere specific. I just needed air, space. A version of myself that didn't exist inside folded laundry and casserole dishes. I found myself near the old library downtown. I hadn't been there in years. I went in. The musty smell of old pages and silence welcomed me like an old friend. I wandered between shelves until I found the aisle that used to be my favorite literature, old poetry, dusty confessionals. And there, tucked between 2 torn spines, was a slim volume called The Truths We Bury. I pulled it out. On the inside cover was a quote handwritten in ink. "We do not destroy ourselves all at once. We disappear slowly by pretending too long." I closed the book. My heart was pounding, because that was it. That was the exact thing I hadn't been able to name. I had disappeared. Bit by bit. Smile by forced smile. Kiss by kiss that meant nothing. Until Daniel saw me. And now I was standing in the wreckage of a life I'd built around pretending. A life Mark still believed in. A life Daniel had dared to challenge. I checked out the book. I drove home slowly. That night after dinner, I told Mark I needed space. I used vague words, burnout, exhaustion, maybe a short solo trip. He looked confused, then concerned, then guilty. "Is this because I've been distant?" he asked. "No," I said gently. "It's because I have been." He didn't push. He just nodded and said, "Whatever you need." And suddenly, I wasn't sure if that kindness made me want to stay or run. Because sometimes the worst betrayals don't come from cruelty. They come from silence, from emptiness, from pretending everything is fine when you haven't been for years. I packed a small bag, just enough for a few days. Mark offered to drop me at the train station. I declined. He didn't ask where I was going, and I didn't offer. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a distant storm behind his eyes, one he was too afraid to speak of. "Text me when you get there," he said. I nodded, "I will." But I didn't know if I meant it. The drive to the lake house was quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for music. Just the low hum of tires against the pavement, and the occasional crackle of my own thoughts. I hadn't called Daniel. I didn't even know if he'd be there. But somehow my hands still knew the turns. My body still remembered the path. Like it was following instinct rather than intention. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, the place looked deserted. Curtains drawn, porch empty. But there was a single light glowing in the back. I knocked on the door and waited. It opened slowly. He looked tired, like the storm I'd brought had been sitting in him all this time. We didn't speak. He stepped aside. I walked in. For the first hour, we didn't talk. He poured us tea. We sat on opposite couches. The rain began tapping against the windows, as if the universe insisted this story couldn't unfold without thunder overhead. Finally, he spoke. You left. I had to. And now you're back. I shook my head. No, I'm just here. I don't know what I'm doing. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes burning through me like lit matches. Then why did you come? I wanted to say it was closure. I wanted to say it was to apologize. But the truth was more dangerous. I needed to feel something that was real, I said. Even if it's wrong, even if it breaks everything. He stood, walked toward me. Do you still love him? That question sat between us like a loaded gun. I don't know, I whispered. I think I love the man he used to be. The one I waited for every evening. The one who used to look at me like I was a choice, not a chore. Daniel reached out and gently touched the side of my face. I look at you like that, he said. I know. He pulled me into an embrace. It wasn't lustful. It wasn't dramatic. It was honest. And in that moment, I wasn't his brother's wife. I wasn't a woman caught between guilt and desire. I was just a woman who wanted to stop vanishing, who wanted to be seen, even if it meant standing in the ruins of everything she thought she was. Returning home was like walking into a house filled with echoes. Everything looked the same. Cushions, fluffed photos, dusted mail, stacked in neat piles. Mark greeted me with a warm smile, arms wide as if I had returned from some noble journey instead of a quiet unraveling. I missed you, he said. I know, I whispered, pressing my cheek to his chest. He held me a little too long, as if he could feel something had shifted, but didn't dare ask what. We had dinner together that night, and I tried to pretend like the food didn't taste different. Like the walls weren't closing in again. Like I wasn't thinking about Daniel with every word I didn't say. Days passed, then a week, no calls, no texts, no signs. Daniel had vanished, but the space he once occupied in my heart hadn't gone with him. One afternoon, I was folding laundry when Mark walked in holding his phone. His face was tight, like someone trying not to look panicked. You never told me you went to the old library branch, he said. I froze. What? He held up his phone. Mom's friend volunteers there. She said your name was on the checkout list. Something about a book with a letter inside. My pulse quickened. He didn't know, but he suspected something, and that was worse. It was nothing I said quickly, just something I wrote to process my feelings. For myself. Feelings about what? I hesitated too long. That trip, did something happen? And just like that, the air turned electric. I wanted to lie. To protect him. To protect me. But something inside me, a part I thought I'd buried, spoke first. Yes, I said softly. Something did happen. He sat down slowly. His eyes were tired. Is it someone I know? I didn't answer. But silence sometimes is the loudest confession. Mark rubbed his face as if trying to erase the image forming in his mind. Was it Daniel? A long pause. Yes. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just nodded and walked out. The door didn't slam, but it closed in a way that felt permanent. And in that moment, I realized something. The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just shows you the bars you've built around your life. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of facing them. The house felt different after Mark left. Not because he took anything with him, but because silence, when it's honest, is heavier than silence born from pretending. He didn't say where he was going. He didn't ask for anything. Just packed a weekend bag and said he needed space. I didn't stop him. I watched from the front porch as he pulled out of the driveway, a man who had given years of his life to a woman who had drifted slowly, quietly right in front of him. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't broken, but because I had already done my mourning long before the confession. I had mourned the marriage in moments no one saw, in the quiet dinners, in the birthdays that passed with a kiss but no warmth, in the way I reached for a hug and received a distracted glance. I sat at the kitchen table that night and reread the note I had written to Daniel. Every word still rang true, but now something had shifted. I didn't just want to feel seen, I wanted to feel whole. And for that, I had to stop looking to other people to validate my worth. The next morning, I drove. I didn't call Daniel, I didn't text. I just showed up. The lake house looked the same, still quiet, still perched between trees and regrets. He opened the door with a look that said he didn't expect me, but had never stopped hoping. I told him, I said. Daniel blinked. What? Mark, I told him everything. He stepped aside, letting me in with a hesitance I hadn't seen in him before. You okay? No, I said. But I needed to stop living two lives. We sat again on that old couch by the window. This time no storm, no thunder, just truth. I don't know what this is, I whispered. What we are. Or if we should even try. I don't either, Daniel said. But I never lied about one thing. What's that? He looked straight into me. You matter. You're not invisible, not to me. And that broke something open inside of me, not from pain, but from relief. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it wasn't the beginning either. But it was honest, and right now that was enough. Weeks passed. Mark didn't come home. At first, the emptiness of his absence echoed through every hallway like guilt. But over time, it softened, not because I stopped caring, but because I started living in truth rather than performance. We spoke eventually. He called. We didn't argue. We didn't accuse. Instead, we acknowledged. We had loved once. We had drifted. We had both played roles in a quiet collapse. He said he needed time to think. I didn't push. Daniel and I didn't leap into anything. We saw each other sometimes. We walked around topics. We shared moments. But we didn't pretend it wasn't complicated. It was. We weren't a love story in the traditional sense. We were two fractured people who found one another at the exact wrong time. But maybe for the right reason. One afternoon, I sat by the lake while Daniel fixed something in the shed. The air was quiet, peaceful. For the first time, I allowed myself to think about the future, not with dread, not with guilt, but with possibility. Not everything had to be shame and shadows. Sometimes a line that was crossed didn't mean the end, it meant a boundary had been tested. And in its place, a new understanding could rise. I wasn't proud of everything that had happened. But I also wasn't going to keep punishing myself for wanting to be seen, to be held, to be loved in a way that felt alive. I wrote in a new journal that night. What we did was a crack in the mirror, but cracks let light through. I'm not who I was before, and maybe that's the beginning of becoming someone new. This wasn't a confession anymore. It was a release of the past, of the guilt, of the need to be perfect in a world that expects silence from women like me. So here I am, no longer pretending, no longer invisible, still uncertain but completely awake. And that is more powerful than any apology.